sometimes the person who breaks your heart is only the beginning of your story, not the end of it. The rain fell in steady sheets across the Seattle skyline as Sophia Bennett stood beneath the covered entrance of a downtown apartment building, gripping the handle of a navy suitcase that suddenly felt heavier than anything she had ever carried. The city lights blurred behind a curtain of water. Cars passed through the wet streets below. People hurried home to warm houses and waiting families. Sophia watched them through tired eyes and wondered what it felt like to belong somewhere. 3 hours earlier, she had still been married. 3 hours earlier, she had still been trying to save something that had been broken for much longer than she wanted to admit. Now a silver wedding band rested inside her coat pocket instead of on her finger. The metal felt cold every time she moved. She had not cried since leaving the house. That surprised her more than anything. For weeks she had imagined this moment. She imagined anger. She imagined shouting. She imagined dramatic words she would never actually say. Instead, there had only been silence. Jason had sat across from her at the kitchen table, staring down at the divorce papers between them. The same kitchen where they once drank coffee together on Sunday mornings. The same kitchen where they celebrated promotions, birthdays, and anniversaries. The same kitchen where she had spent years believing they were building a future together. Looking back, Sophia could not remember exactly when the distance started. Perhaps it arrived in small pieces. Missed dinners. Short conversations. Forgotten promises. Late nights that gradually became normal. She had ignored each warning sign because love often asks people to believe what they hope is true rather than what they can clearly see. When Jason finally admitted he had been seeing someone else, the confession did not feel like a thunderbolt. It felt like the last missing piece of a puzzle she had been avoiding for months. Somehow that hurt even more. The elevator doors opened behind her. The building manager smiled politely. "Are you coming in, Miss Bennett?" Sophia glanced over her shoulder. For a moment she considered calling a friend, calling her parents, calling anyone. Instead, she simply nodded and rolled her suitcase toward the elevator. The apartment waiting upstairs measured barely 700 square feet. The living room was small. The kitchen was smaller. A single window overlooked the city. It was not glamorous. It was not the life she imagined for herself at 34 years old. Yet when she stepped inside and closed the door, a strange feeling settled over her. Quiet. For the first time in years, there was no tension hanging in the air. No wondering where Jason was. No rehearsing difficult conversations. No pretending everything was fine. The silence felt unfamiliar. Almost uncomfortable. Sophia set her suitcase beside the couch and walked toward the window. Rain continued falling across the city below. Somewhere out there, Jason was beginning a new chapter. The thought should have broken her. Instead, she felt something else. Exhaustion. Relief. And beneath both emotions, something smaller. Something she had not felt in a very long time. Possibility. She pressed her hand against the cool glass and stared at the lights stretching toward the horizon. Her marriage had ended tonight. The life she spent years protecting was gone. But as the rain washed across the city and the darkness settled around her, Sophia made a quiet promise to herself. She would not spend the rest of her life mourning what she lost. One day, somehow, she would build something better. 3 months passed before Sophia Bennett realized she had gone an entire day without thinking about Jason. The discovery came unexpectedly on a quiet Tuesday morning as she stood in line at a small coffee shop 2 blocks from her apartment. Sunlight streamed through the front windows. A barista called out orders. The scent of roasted coffee beans filled the air. Life moved around her with ordinary rhythm, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her heart did not ache. That realization stopped her cold. In the beginning, every corner of the city carried a memory. A restaurant where they celebrated anniversaries. A bookstore they visited on rainy weekends. A waterfront bench where Jason once promised they would grow old together. For months, Seattle had felt like a museum of broken promises. But somewhere between rebuilding her routine and learning how to enjoy her own company again, those memories had started losing their power. Sophia carried her coffee to a table by the window and opened her laptop. Her new position at a marketing consulting firm kept her busy. The salary was not extraordinary, but the work challenged her in ways she had forgotten she enjoyed. Her coworkers respected her ideas. Clients valued her input. Every completed project reminded her of something she had nearly lost during the final years of her marriage: confidence. Across town, Jason Bennett sat in a sleek office overlooking the city. His life appeared unchanged from the outside. The same expensive suits. The same luxury apartment. The same ambitious career. Yet beneath the polished surface, frustration followed him everywhere. The excitement he once chased seemed strangely temporary now. Conversations felt shallow. Achievements felt smaller than expected. Occasionally, he found himself reaching for his phone to tell Sophia something before remembering she was no longer there. The realization arrived like a small cut each time. Not devastating, just persistent. Meanwhile, Sophia's evenings slowly transformed into something she once thought impossible: peaceful. She began taking long walks through the city after work. She joined a weekend book club. She learned how to cook meals she actually enjoyed instead of planning dinners around someone else's preferences. Her apartment remained modest, but it felt increasingly like home. One evening, while organizing a bookshelf, she discovered an old photo tucked inside a novel. The picture showed her and Jason during their second year of marriage. Both were smiling. Both looked happy. Sophia studied the image for several seconds. Then she placed it back inside the book and returned it to the shelf. No tears came. No anger surfaced. Just acceptance. Some chapters belonged in the past. A week later, her firm assigned her to assist with preparations for a regional business leadership conference. The event would attract executives, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders from across the country. Sophia spent days coordinating presentations and schedules. The project was demanding, but she enjoyed every minute of it. On the morning of the conference, she arrived before sunrise. The convention center buzzed with activity as staff prepared for hundreds of attendees. Banners were being installed. Registration desks organized. Audio systems tested. Sophia moved efficiently through the organized chaos, reviewing final details with her team. As she crossed the main lobby carrying a folder of schedules, she nearly collided with a tall man stepping out of an elevator. Papers slipped from her hands and scattered across the polished floor. "I am so sorry," the stranger said immediately as he crouched to help gather them. His voice was calm, genuine. Sophia knelt beside him, reaching for the last page. Their eyes met briefly. Blue eyes. Steady and attentive. The kind of eyes that actually focused on the person standing in front of them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the man handed her the final sheet of paper and smiled. "Looks like we both survived the collision." Sophia laughed despite herself. A simple moment. Nothing extraordinary. Yet as she continued across the lobby moments later, she found herself glancing back once. The stranger had already disappeared into the crowd. She had no way of knowing that this brief encounter would soon change the direction of her life forever. For the rest of the conference, Sophia told herself she would never see the stranger again. Large events attracted hundreds of attendees. People arrived, exchanged business cards, attended meetings, and disappeared back into their own lives. That was how these things worked. Yet somehow fate seemed to have different plans. 2 hours after their brief collision in the lobby, Sophia entered a conference room carrying presentation materials for a panel discussion. The room was already filling with guests. Executives chatted near the stage. Event staff checked microphones and lighting. Sophia moved quickly toward the front row to place name cards on reserved seats. As she reached the final chair, she froze. Sitting 3 feet away was the same man from the lobby. He looked up at the exact same moment. Recognition flashed across his face. Then he smiled. Not the polished smile people often used at networking events. A real one. Warm and effortless. "Good thing we are not carrying papers this time," he said. Sophia laughed before she could stop herself. "I was thinking the same thing." The stranger stood and extended his hand. "Alexander Hayes." Sophia shook it. Sophia Bennett. The name meant nothing to her, which, under normal circumstances, would have surprised most people in the room. Alexander Hayes happened to be one of the most respected business leaders in the country. His company employed thousands of people across multiple states. Financial magazines featured him regularly. Industry conferences competed to secure him as a keynote speaker. Yet Sophia recognized none of that. She had spent the past year rebuilding her life, not following corporate celebrities. To her, he was simply a polite man who helped pick up papers from the floor. Over the next several days, their paths crossed repeatedly. Sometimes in conference hallways, sometimes near the coffee station, sometimes during networking sessions. Each interaction lasted only a few minutes, but something felt different. Alexander asked questions and actually listened to the answers. When Sophia spoke about her work, he seemed genuinely interested. When she shared ideas, he treated them with respect. There was no arrogance. No need to dominate every conversation. One afternoon, they found themselves standing near a large window overlooking Elliott Bay between sessions. Rain clouds drifted across the water while ferries moved through the harbor below. "What made you choose marketing?" Alexander asked. Sophia thought about the question. "I like helping people tell stories." He nodded. "That makes sense." "Why?" A faint smile touched his face. "Because every time you talk about your work, your eyes change." Sophia laughed softly. "My eyes change." "They do." He pointed toward the conference room behind them. "You spend all morning looking professional." Then he gestured toward her. "But when you talk about something you care about, you look happy." The observation caught her off guard. Not because it was romantic. Because it was accurate. Sophia could not remember the last time someone paid enough attention to notice something so small. That evening, after returning home, she found herself smiling while unpacking her bag. The realization surprised her. For months, she had measured progress by the absence of pain. Fewer bad memories. Fewer sleepless nights. Fewer moments of regret. But this felt different. This was not about moving away from something. It was about moving toward something. Across town, Jason sat alone in his apartment staring out at the city lights. The relationship he once believed would make him happier had already begun unraveling beneath the weight of reality. Excitement had faded. Everyday life remained. Yet despite having everything he thought he wanted, he felt increasingly restless. Meanwhile, Sophia stood beside her apartment window watching the same city from a different neighborhood. For the first time in years, she was not looking backward. And somewhere beyond the skyline, a future she never expected was quietly beginning to move toward her. Over the following months, Alexander Hayes became a quiet but consistent presence in Sophia Bennett's life. There was no dramatic pursuit. No extravagant displays designed to impress her. Their connection grew through ordinary moments. Shared conversations after industry events. Unexpected encounters at coffee shops. Long discussions about books, careers, family, and the strange ways life sometimes forced people to begin again. Sophia found herself looking forward to those conversations more than she wanted to admit. What surprised her most was how easy everything felt. With Jason, she had spent years trying to preserve a relationship that seemed to grow heavier over time. Every disagreement felt like a problem to solve. Every difficult conversation felt like walking across thin ice. With Alexander, there was no pressure. No performance. No need to become someone else. One rainy Friday evening, they sat in a small waterfront restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. Ferries crossed the dark water, while city lights reflected across the surface like scattered gold. Sophia stirred her coffee absent-mindedly while Alexander listened to her describe a challenging client project. When she finished, he smiled. "You realize you solved your own problem halfway through that story." Sophia laughed. "Did I?" "You did." He leaned back in his chair. "You just needed someone willing to listen long enough for you to hear yourself." The comment stayed with her, because it described something far larger than a work project. For years, she had been surrounded by people eager to offer opinions, advice, criticism, expectations. Alexander did something different. He listened. Truly listened. Weeks later, Sophia's company hosted another business networking event at a luxury hotel downtown. She arrived early to help coordinate guest registration. The ballroom buzzed with activity as attendees gathered beneath sparkling chandeliers. Sophia stood near the entrance reviewing schedules when she overheard two executives speaking nearby. Alexander Hayes is supposed to arrive around 7. The Alexander Hayes? The CEO. Sophia glanced up briefly before returning to her work. Then she froze. The CEO. Her eyes shifted back toward the conversation. One executive laughed. The man practically owns half the West Coast business market. Sophia stared at them. A strange feeling settled in her chest. Moments later, the ballroom entrance opened. Guests turned toward the doorway. And there he was. Alexander. Wearing the same calm expression he always carried. Greeting people with the same humility she had seen for months. Yet the reaction around him was entirely different. Business leaders approached him immediately. Event organizers rushed forward. Conversations stopped as people recognized his arrival. Sophia watched the scene unfold in complete silence. Throughout every conversation they had shared, Alexander had never mentioned the scale of his success. Never once. Later that evening, she found him standing alone on an outdoor terrace overlooking the city. Cold air drifted through the night. Alexander smiled when he saw her approaching. You look surprised. Sophia folded her arms. You are a billionaire CEO. Alexander winced slightly. That sounds much worse when someone says it out loud. Despite herself, Sophia laughed. Why did you not tell me? He looked toward the skyline for a moment before answering. Because I wanted you to know me before you knew that. The simplicity of the answer stole every prepared response from her mind. For months, she had wondered why he seemed different from other powerful people she met through work. Standing there beneath the Seattle skyline, she finally understood. His wealth was not what made him remarkable. His character was. And in that moment, Sophia realized something equally important. If Alexander had introduced himself as a billionaire on the day they first met, she probably would have walked away. Instead, she had fallen in love with the man long before she learned about the empire attached to his name. Learning that Alexander Hayes was a billionaire changed surprisingly little between them. For a few days, Sophia Bennett wondered if it should have changed everything. After all, people reacted differently around him once they knew who he was. Executives straightened their posture. Investors competed for his attention. Reporters followed his appearances. Yet whenever they were alone, Alexander remained exactly the same man who had knelt on a conference center floor to help her gather scattered papers. That consistency mattered more than any number attached to his name. One Saturday afternoon, Alexander invited Sophia to visit a community education center his company funded outside Seattle. Sophia expected a carefully managed public relations event. Instead, she found children attending after-school programs, teachers leading workshops, and volunteers helping local families. Alexander moved through the building greeting people by name. He remembered birthdays, asked about relatives, stopped to listen whenever someone spoke. Watching him, Sophia began to understand something important. His success was not measured only by businesses or wealth. It was reflected in the lives he quietly improved without seeking recognition. During the drive back to the city, they traveled along a coastal highway, overlooking Puget Sound. The late afternoon sun painted the water gold. For several minutes neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable. Easy. Eventually Sophia looked toward him. Why do you spend so much time on projects like that? Alexander smiled faintly. Because success means very little if it only benefits you. Sophia stared out the window. Years earlier, she would have dismissed a statement like that as something people said to sound impressive. But after everything she had seen, she knew he meant every word. Weeks turned into months. Their relationship deepened naturally. There were no dramatic declarations. No attempts to rush the future. They built something stronger than excitement. Trust. Sophia found herself sharing thoughts she had never spoken aloud before. Fears. Dreams. Regrets. Alexander listened without judgment. More importantly, he never treated her as someone who needed saving. He respected her independence, encouraged her ambitions, celebrated her accomplishments. For the first time in her adult life, Sophia felt fully seen. One evening after work, she arrived home to find a small package outside her apartment door. Inside was a first-edition copy of her favorite novel. Tucked between the pages was a note written in Alexander's familiar handwriting. "You once mentioned checking this book out from the library every summer when you were 13. I thought it deserved a permanent home." Sophia stared at the note for several minutes. Not because of the gift itself, because of what it represented. He listened. He remembered. Across town, Jason Bennett's life continued moving in a different direction. The confidence he once projected had gradually begun to fade. His career remained successful, but the personal happiness he expected never materialized. Friends noticed the change before he did. He laughed less, smiled less, seemed distracted even during important conversations. Occasionally someone would mention Sophia's name in passing. Each time, a quiet regret settled a little deeper inside him. Meanwhile, on a crisp autumn evening overlooking the Seattle skyline, Alexander and Sophia stood together on the rooftop terrace of a charity event. Music drifted through the air below. City lights stretched toward the horizon. Alexander turned toward her. For a moment, he simply looked at her. Not evaluating. Not admiring from a distance. Seeing her. The real her. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. Sophia's heart skipped unexpectedly. The small velvet box appeared beneath the glow of city lights. Everything around them seemed to grow quiet. Alexander smiled softly. "You once told me that after your divorce, you stopped believing life could surprise you in good ways." Emotion filled Sophia's eyes. "I remember." His smile widened. "I would like to change that." And standing beneath the Seattle night sky, Sophia realized the greatest gift Alexander had ever given her was not his success, his influence, or his wealth. It was helping her believe in happiness again. For a moment, the city seemed to disappear. The lights beyond the rooftop terrace blurred into soft streaks of gold and silver as Sophia Bennett stared at the small velvet box in Alexander Hayes's hand. The cool evening air carried the distant sounds of traffic and music from the charity event below, but none of it felt real. All she could see was the man standing in front of her. The man who had entered her life quietly and changed it completely. Alexander's expression remained calm, though she could see a trace of nervousness behind his confident smile. It was the first time she had ever seen him uncertain. Somehow, that made the moment even more meaningful. He was not standing there as a billionaire. Not as a CEO. Not as one of the most powerful business leaders in the country. He was simply a man offering his heart to the woman he loved. Sophia felt tears gather in her eyes. Not because of the proposal itself. Because of the journey that had brought her there. Less than 2 years earlier, she had stood alone in a small apartment believing the best parts of her life were over. She remembered the silence after her divorce. The loneliness. The fear of starting over. She remembered questioning her own worth, wondering if she had somehow failed. Looking back now, she realized those painful months had not destroyed her. They had rebuilt her. Slowly, carefully, one day at a time. Alexander stepped closer. "Sophia?" His voice carried gentle concern. She laughed softly through her tears. "You are making it very difficult to say anything." Relief appeared in his eyes. "That sounds promising." Sophia nodded. "It is." The answer came naturally, effortlessly, because she had known it long before he asked. The years ahead remained uncertain. Every marriage carried risks. Every relationship required trust. But for the first time in her life, she was not choosing someone because she hoped he would complete her. She was choosing someone who respected the person she had already become. Several months later, sunlight filled a small coastal chapel overlooking Puget Sound. Family members and close friends gathered inside as waves rolled gently against the shoreline below. The ceremony itself was elegant but simple. Exactly what Sophia wanted. As she walked down the aisle, she caught sight of Alexander waiting near the front. His smile widened the moment their eyes met. In that instant, every difficult chapter of her past felt incredibly distant. Not erased, Not forgotten. Simply transformed into part of the path that led her there. After the ceremony, guests gathered outside overlooking the water. Laughter drifted through the afternoon air. Photographs captured moments that would become lifelong memories. Across the crowd, Sophia noticed a familiar face she had not seen in nearly a year. Jason Bennett. He stood near the edge of the gathering speaking quietly with a mutual acquaintance. Time had changed him. Not dramatically. Just enough to reveal the weight of regret he carried. Their eyes met briefly. Jason offered a polite smile. Sophia returned it. No anger remained. No bitterness. No desire to prove anything. Only peace. For years she imagined happiness would arrive through revenge or vindication. Instead, it arrived through healing. Jason glanced toward Alexander, then back toward her. For a moment, Sophia saw understanding cross his face. He finally recognized what he had lost. Not because Alexander was wealthy. Not because of success or status. He had lost a woman whose loyalty, kindness, and strength he never fully appreciated. The realization arrived too late. But by then, it no longer mattered. As the sun began setting over the water, Alexander joined Sophia near the shoreline. He slipped his hand into hers. Together they watched the horizon glow with shades of gold and amber. The future stretched before them, unwritten and full of possibility. Sophia smiled quietly. She had not survived heartbreak to become someone else's success story. She had rebuilt her life, rediscovered her worth, and found happiness on her own terms. And standing beside the man she loved, she finally understood the truth. She did not win because her former husband lost. She won because she never gave up on herself. Nearly a year after their wedding, Sophia Bennett no longer measured her life by what she had escaped. She measured it by what she had built. The difference mattered. On a crisp spring evening, she stood before a floor-to-ceiling window in her office overlooking downtown Seattle. Below, the city moved beneath fading sunlight while ferries crossed Elliott Bay in the distance. Her marketing firm had grown beyond anything she once imagined. New clients arrived each month. Her team expanded. Projects that once seemed intimidating now felt exciting. Success had arrived quietly, one decision at a time. A soft knock sounded at her office door. Her assistant stepped inside carrying a black envelope trimmed with silver lettering. This just arrived. Sophia thanked her and opened it after she left. The invitation was for the Northwest Business Leadership Gala, one of the most influential annual events on the West Coast. Industry leaders, investors, executives, and entrepreneurs would gather for an evening of networking and recognition. Sophia smiled. She had attended events like this before. Yet something about this invitation felt different. Perhaps because years earlier she would have entered such a room seeking approval. Now she entered as someone who belonged there. That evening, Alexander arrived home to find the invitation resting on the kitchen counter. He picked it up and laughed softly. Looks like we have plans next month. Sophia leaned against the island. Apparently. Alexander studied her for a moment. You know they are giving you the Innovation Leadership Award. She blinked. What? You did not know? He smiled. I thought everyone knew. For several seconds she simply stared at him. Then she shook her head and laughed. Years ago, recognition like that would have felt impossible. Now it felt earned. The following weeks passed quickly. Meanwhile, across the city, Jason Bennett received his own invitation to the gala. His company remained successful enough to secure attendance at major industry events, though his personal life looked very different than it once had. The relationship that followed his divorce had ended months earlier. Friends came and went. Work consumed most of his time. Some evenings he found himself sitting alone in a luxury apartment that felt strangely empty despite its size. When he saw Sophia's name listed among the evening's honorees, he paused. For a long moment he simply stared at the announcement. Then he quietly closed the email. On the night of the gala, hundreds of guests filled a magnificent ballroom illuminated by crystal chandeliers and soft golden light. Conversations flowed across the room. Glasses clinked. Cameras flashed. Near the entrance, Sophia stepped from a black sedan wearing an elegant navy evening gown. Alexander offered his hand as they entered together. Heads turned immediately. Not because of Alexander's wealth. Not because of his reputation. Because the woman beside him carried herself with unmistakable confidence. She no longer looked like someone recovering from heartbreak. She looked like someone fully alive. As they moved through the ballroom greeting guests, Sophia felt unexpectedly calm. Then, near the center of the room, she saw a familiar face. Jason stood across the crowd speaking with colleagues. For a brief moment their eyes met. Neither looked away. Neither rushed forward. Years of history existed between them, yet the emotions were different now. Sophia felt no anger, no sadness, no desire to revisit the past. Only gratitude for the journey that brought her here. Beside her, Alexander gently squeezed her hand. Sophia smiled and squeezed back. Then together they continued forward into the brightly lit room, leaving the past exactly where it belonged. The ballroom grew quieter as the evening progressed. Awards were presented. Applause echoed beneath crystal chandeliers. Conversation shifted from business to personal stories as guests relaxed into the celebration. Near the front of the room, Sophia Bennett sat beside Alexander Hayes while listening to the final speaker of the evening. She felt completely at ease. That feeling alone would have amazed the woman she used to be. Years earlier, rooms like this made her question herself. Wonder whether she belonged. Wonder whether she was enough. Tonight, none of those doubts remained. When her name was announced for the Innovation Leadership Award, the audience rose in applause. Sophia walked toward the stage beneath warm lights while cameras flashed around the ballroom. She accepted the award with a grateful smile before stepping to the podium. Looking out across hundreds of faces, she paused for a moment. Not because she was nervous, because she was remembering. The small apartment, the lonely nights, the uncertainty after her divorce. The long process of rebuilding a life she once thought was broken beyond repair. A few years ago, she began, I thought losing something important meant my story was over. The room fell silent. What I eventually learned is that sometimes losing the wrong thing creates space for the right things to find you. Several people nodded. Sophia smiled softly. Success is not about never falling. It is about having the courage to stand up again after life changes directions. Applause filled the room once more. Across the audience, Jason Bennett sat motionless. Every word landed harder than he expected. Not because Sophia sounded angry. Quite the opposite. There was no bitterness in her voice. No attempt to make anyone feel guilty. She simply looked happy. Truly happy. And somehow that reality hurt more than any accusation ever could. As Sophia returned to her seat, Alexander stood to greet her. Pride shone openly in his eyes. Not because she won an award. Because he knew how hard she had worked to become the woman standing beside him. Later. That evening, guests gathered throughout the ballroom for cocktails and conversation. Sophia found herself speaking with industry leaders, entrepreneurs, and nonprofit directors. Several approached specifically to congratulate her. Others wanted advice about growing their own businesses. Throughout every interaction, she remained exactly the same person she had always been. Kind, genuine, grounded. Across the room, Jason watched quietly. For years, he convinced himself that happiness was something waiting somewhere else. A better opportunity, a different relationship, a different future. In chasing those illusions, he failed to appreciate the extraordinary person already standing beside him. Now he finally understood. Not because Sophia married a billionaire. Not because she received public recognition. Because she became the strongest version of herself after he walked away. Near the end of the evening, fate placed them near the same balcony overlooking the Seattle skyline. For the first time in years, they stood alone together. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass. Jason looked toward her. Congratulations. Sophia smiled politely. Thank you. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Jason exhaled slowly. You look happy. Sophia glanced toward the ballroom where Alexander was speaking with several guests. Her smile softened. I am. Jason nodded. The answer contained everything he needed to hear. There were no dramatic confessions. No desperate attempts to change the past. Some opportunities only exist once. Eventually, Sophia turned back toward the ballroom. Before leaving, she offered him a sincere smile. Not one filled with victory. Not one filled with pity. Just kindness. The same kindness he failed to appreciate when he had it. Jason watched her walk away toward the life she had built. Toward the people who loved her. Toward the future waiting ahead. And standing alone beneath the city lights, he finally understood the true cost of taking someone for granted. 6 months passed after the gala, and life continued moving forward with the quiet confidence Sophia Bennett had worked so hard to build. Summer arrived in Seattle, bringing long evenings filled with golden light and clear skies stretching across Puget Sound. Some mornings she woke before sunrise and sat on the balcony of the home she now shared with Alexander Hayes, coffee warming her hands as the city slowly came to life below. Those moments became her favorite part of the day. Not because of the view. Not because of the beautiful home. Because they reminded her how far she had come. One Saturday afternoon, Sophia received an unexpected message from an old friend inviting her to a small reunion gathering. The event would bring together people she had not seen in years. Former coworkers. College friends. Mutual acquaintances from different chapters of her life. Normally, she might have declined. Instead, she accepted. That evening, the gathering took place at a waterfront restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. Laughter drifted through the open-air patio while guests shared stories and memories. Sophia moved comfortably through the crowd, enjoying conversations she once would have approached with anxiety. Time had changed her. Experience had changed her. She no longer entered rooms wondering whether she belonged. She simply belonged. At one point, she stepped away from the group and walked toward the railing overlooking the water. The sunset painted the horizon with shades of orange and gold. Behind her, voices blended into a soft background hum. Then she heard a familiar voice. Sophia. She turned. Jason Bennett stood several feet away. For a moment, neither spoke. Years earlier, this encounter would have filled her with complicated emotions. Now she simply smiled politely. Jason returned the smile. He looked different. Not older, exactly. Just quieter. More reflective. The confidence that once bordered on arrogance had softened into humility. They exchanged a few simple words about work, mutual friends, and life. The conversation felt surprisingly easy. Eventually, Jason looked toward the water. I spent a long time regretting what happened. Sophia listened without interrupting. He nodded slowly. Not because of your success. Not because of Alexander. His eyes met hers. Because I finally understood who you were after you were gone. The honesty in his voice carried no expectation. No hidden agenda. Just truth. Sophia looked back toward the horizon. The waves reflected the last light of the day. We were different people then, she said gently. Jason laughed softly. That is probably true. A comfortable silence followed. Then he smiled. I am glad you're happy. Sophia could tell he meant it. Thank you. Across the patio, Alexander appeared near the entrance. The moment he spotted Sophia, his face brightened. The same expression he carried every time he saw her. Jason noticed it too. For a brief second, understanding passed between them. Not resentment. Not jealousy. Acceptance. Some stories were never meant to continue. They existed to teach lessons before ending. Jason extended his hand. Sophia shook it. Then he walked back toward the gathering while she crossed the patio toward Alexander. He slipped an arm gently around her shoulders. Ready to head home? He asked. Sophia smiled. I am. Together they walked toward the parking area as the last sunlight disappeared beyond the bay. Looking back, Sophia realized her greatest victory had never been finding a wealthy husband. It had never been public recognition, career success, or proving anyone wrong. Her greatest victory was learning her value had never depended on another person's ability to see it. The woman who once stood alone in a tiny apartment believing her life had fallen apart was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and finally at peace. As city lights shimmered across the water and the evening settled around them, Sophia squeezed Alexander's hand and smiled. She did not survive heartbreak to get revenge. She survived it to find herself. And in the end, that made all the difference.